Hey y'all, happy Tuesday. So if you are not subscribed to this channel, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscription button below. Also, you can follow me over on Instagram, Rhonda_Mary, RhondaMary Vids, and I'm on Twitter at I am RhondaMary. So as you guys come into the room, let me know that you are coming into the room, and I hope your early week is off to a great start. So I don't know who needs to hear this, but being soft on violent criminals is not progressive, nor is it compassionate. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and talk about this tonight. Hey to everyone coming into the room. Hey King BJ. Hey Pilu. So if you guys are familiar with the Young Turks, you have the young lady over there that is a regular commentator. I believe her name is pronounced Anna Kasparian. And well, she's a little bit under the hot button today, okay? So Anna recently covered a segment where this guy that was in the street attacked or assaulted, I should say, on camera, this elderly lady, and she talked about that, and they talked about it on the program. She made tweets about it, and other progressives are coming at her neck. They're coming at her head. They're saying, oh, you're not supposed to have this opinion. And so I'm going to show you guys that tonight, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about how progressives in particular have been absolutely detrimental to the criminal justice reform topic. How now, because of that detriment, it's practically been pushed under the rug. I mean, absolutely deaded, at least for midterms, and possibly even to after that. As we saw, at least some progress being made, and those things being heavily discussed during the Trump administration. If you guys are familiar with my channel and have been following me for a while, you know that I cover, I could say somewhat extensively, the criminal justice reform that affected the federal prisons, as well as, I don't want to say campaigned, but was trying to get local prisons and facilities on board as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. So the Young Turks are known for some of their more progressive leftist takes. And more importantly, they have been in a lot of ways like pro, defund the police and pro criminal justice reform and things like that. And ultimately, if you've been here for a while, you know that on the bigger scheme of things, I don't have any problems with criminal justice reform, and I think that in a lot of ways it's needed. But the specific way that this issue was talked about and handled made it really easy for it to be discarded, exactly like we've seen it. And I talked about this a while ago, but now it's funny to watch this take a turn. But anyway, so let's get to the clip so you guys can see directly why people are picking on, well, I have the tweets pulled up here, why people are picking on Anna today from the Young Turks. So as you can see here, this guy, let me give y'all some sound. Hey. You okay? So that was a little graphic and violent, and I probably should have gave you guys somewhat of a warning about that. But anyway, the Young Turks recently covered this, and as she's been getting backlash, Anna goes on to say, This is a man who was arrested 41 times. After this incident, he was released and went on to send a subway worker to the hospital with a broken collarbone. But according to this crime reporter, the man committing assaults, breaking bones, is the real victim. And so some of the responses you'll see here is, love you, Anna, but this is not a good take. I don't know the details of this particular case, but what you are trying to achieve with this narrative, the public hears enough dishonest fear-mongering about crime. Left-alt media should offer something different, such as exploring root causes of crime. Can I, let's see. Really, Anna, just lean into the propaganda because it financially helps you. You push the narrative, clearly picking sides. You are not a truth teller or progressive. You are propaganda. Violence stems from root issues you fail to report on. I think it's super interesting, right? That quickly, right? That quickly you have these people turning on her, questioning her platform, right? Questioning all these things about her. And as we clearly saw in the video, this was a person that was assaulted. And it's like, this is my problem, okay? This is my biggest problem with the everyday progressive or the progressive platform. It's the fact that you can't talk in nuance and layers, and you can't talk about these things holistically, right? Like, you have to ignore all of the downsides. I don't care what, any important topic that we're having that could be deemed political, right? Whether it be abortions, trans rights, women rights, crime, you always have to turn a blind eye to a certain segment of the real world and what's actually going on. You have to pretend that what's not happening right in front of our eyes, or even some of the downfalls of these possible legislation that they want to push and stuff like this, is non-existent. But anyway, let's move on and we'll talk about it a little bit more. So she goes on to show the 41 crimes that he has been, sent to jail for or whatever. Now, out of the last 5 crimes, I think 4 of them, or 6, I should say, 4 of them deal with like assault, some type of injury, assault, physical injury, and things like this. And it has gone on throughout the years, including violent behavior, okay? And we see the video, we see what happens with our own eyes, but yet people aren't allowed to have, like I said, a holistic conversation, because you have to pretend it's just one way or the other. You have to be boxed into these binaries. We're not able to talk about things from a holistic perspective. And I said this when criminal reform, the whole discussion was more popular. As you see, not as many people even talking about it anymore, especially politicians. But I talked about it at that time. I talked about how the slogan of defund the police was particularly going to be hurtful, and how I had suspicions that going forward, this was going to be dropped, or they were going to do a complete 180, and we've seen that come into fruition because of the people like this responding to Anna, okay? These people have no sense of the real world. These people have probably never been assaulted in the public streets, don't live in poor communities, in these more diverse communities, okay? And don't really care about what actual people are feeling in these neighborhoods, okay? Another recent example of that, and I'm going to tell you guys in a second why all of this is important and how all of this comes together. So I don't know if you guys remember, but this was just about a month, maybe going on 2 months ago, and a guy named Andrew Sundberg was shooting through his apartment, right? I guess he was watching this woman, and I can't remember you know, maybe he had been watching her kind of like move about and stuff like that. And there were literally bullet holes coming through her, I believe it was her bathroom, okay? She had 2 children in an apartment, and he was shooting through the apartment. They ended up making calls to the police. The police came. There was a standoff for over 6 hours, okay? The police end up, you know, ending it because even as the police got there, he was still shooting through the apartment. They still did the standoff with him. It resulted in his life being ended. And you have protesters, supposedly Black Lives Matter protesters, that showed up out there, and this was her response. This was the mom's response, whose apartment he was shooting.
I'm sure it was a terrible. You're a liar. Shut up.
Just let it go. Grief in silence. This is not okay. This is not a George Floyd situation. George Floyd was unarmed. He was unarmed.
You're alive.
It is not okay. My kids have to deal with this and probably have a mental illness now because they almost lost their life. There's bullet holes in my kitchen because they sat in the fucking hallway watching my move. I wish it never happened. Even I don't have no place to call home. I can't sleep that night.
She's obviously going through a moment.
This is not okay.
This is what they want to show on the TV. She's obviously going through a moment.
This is not okay. Just go home. Go home. There's none of you guys not found that man who to check his health.
Shut up. Shut up. You're
No, you guys did not come. He did not. You guys did not come and visit that man. This is what we talked about. It wasn't. This is not so bad. It's so bad. It's like, man, wait, no, because you think I'm okay. My kid's in the car. My kid's in the car. My kid is in the car. He tried to kill me in front of my kids. He tried to kill me in front of my kids.
Okay, so y'all see that, and some of you probably remember it, okay? Now, the biggest problem with this is because of these people's inability to compartmentalize the difference between violent and non-violent offenses is the very reason why the criminal justice reform discussion is no longer happening. That is why marijuana arrests are raising under Biden, increasing under Biden. They have increased more since Obama was in office. Now, as a result of the crime that's been happening, now you have more gun owners in America than ever before. Defund the police is no longer popular. And Biden has also increased the police budgets along with mayors in Democratic cities who are also Black, okay? And some of the most popular cities across America have also increased police budgets and have came directly out to speak against this. This is the fault of people right now, like the people in Anna's comments, who don't have the ability to have discussions in full, to have holistic discussions, to make it make sense for everyday people. And even for them to how they handled this girl as if like, oh, this is what they want to show the cameras, as if like this is not a real person, as if everything that we see happening now isn't a result of the crime that is increased in these neighborhoods. The defund the police movement was so unpopular that it literally got thrown under the bus. It's not being talked about, and now we're supposed to pretend that the people that had the direct result on pushing this didn't, and then to continue to try to even go in this direction when it makes absolutely no sense. But let's go ahead and look at some of the ways or some of the things that's happened as a result of this. So one of the first things being, let's talk about specifically how Democrats went from defund to refund the police, with many of them, like Democrat Richie Torres, saying defund the police is dead, Nancy Pelosi, who repeated those sentiments, and Abigail Sandsberg, who called defunding the police a terrible idea, along with Keith Ellison. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at this older article that came out in, when was this? This was February of this year. As crime rates rise ahead of the midterms, Black mayors of the nation's largest cities are leading the call to crack down on lawlessness. A young Democratic member of Congress declared the defund the police movement dead on Thursday, and Black Democratic mayors from San Francisco to New York, Chicago to Washington, D.C. are moving to increase police budgets and end the reign of criminals. As violent crime surges ahead of the November midterms, President Joe Biden and the Democratic Party are toughening their talk on crime and refunding the police only 2 years after some progressive activists took up the call to defund them. People are still against crime and people want to be safe, said former Philadelphia Mayor Michael Nutter in an interview. You're seeing in all communities all across the country that when folks actually come to grips with the conflict of rising crime rates and an effort to quote unquote take away policing from the public being way ahead of the politicians as usual, figured out no, that's not a good idea. We want to be safe. Biden traveled to New York City Thursday to meet with the city's recently elected Democratic Mayor Eric Adams, a former police officer who has vowed to clean up the streets. Adams' victory in the Crown Democratic primary last year was seen by many in the party as a sign that voters were done with anti-police rhetoric. So here you have, particularly in some of the cities that's known for being the quote unquote most progressive, you literally have mayors ramping up policing 2 years after this was one of the most controversial, most talked about, which goes to prove that everything that is talked about on Twitter does not mean it's popular at the actual polls. But when I said this 2 years ago, when I talked about how directly defund the police was a stain on criminal justice reform and wasn't allowing people to understand the depths of what that actually means, okay? And nobody gives a crap when you say, oh, well, that's not what that really means. Go Google it. When people are turning up at the polls, your slogan is what they're going to remember. And when people are seeing crime, because you can say what you want on Twitter, right? It can sound cute. You can use your hashtags from the comfort of your home. But when people living in these cities, like a New York, who have to take the subway every day, who are walking to their destinations, who have these high rates of crime and robbery and assault, your tweets are not going to be what translates at the polls, okay? It's not what's going to happen. So that has become widely unpopular, so much so that you can barely get anybody to even mumble it these days, okay? Not to mention that gun purchases all over the country have increased exponentially. This is according to The Guardian. Gun purchases accelerated in the U.S. from 2020 to 2021. Gun purchases accelerated in the U.S. during 2020 to 2021 compared to 2019, with more than 5 million adults becoming first-time gun owners between January 2020 in April 2021, compared to 2.4 million adults in 2019, a study on new gun ownership reveals. The survey, conducted by Professor Matt Miller at Northeastern University and published today in the Annals of Internal Medicine, shows that between January 2019 and April this year, around 7.5 million people, or 2.9% of all U.S. adults who had not previously owned guns went and purchased them. Okay? Most, or about 5.4 million, brought the weapons into homes that had not previously had them. Not only that, who was the fastest growing group of gun owners? Black women. Okay? Between January 2019 and April 2021, of the 48% of women gun owners, 21% were Black women. What does this increase in gun ownership tell you? It tells you that not only during the time of COVID was public trust was manipulated and undermined, okay? But you also had a lack of trust in police responses. You had people turning on their TVs as they see crimes raising in their neighborhoods, and they're feeling unsafe. And so what do people do? They go out and purchase firearms. I find it ironic that the same people that want to almost be soft on violent attackers are also anti-gun. So not only do they not want you to have the ability to protect yourself, but if someone assaults or attacks you, they want you to pretty much be okay with it, and you as a victim are literally an afterthought. If that doesn't tell you the polarization and the absolute lack of moral standard that we've reached and the lack of ethics, I don't know what is. And how any of this makes sense to people, just remains to be seen. So, as a result, we have more gun owners. We have a defund the police movement that's no longer being talked about, okay? And we have the voters that felt a certain way, or this is the reason this isn't being talked about going into midterms. Poll says 75% say defund the police caused violent crime wave. 3 out of 4 Americans say defunding police departments has contributed to the rise in violent crime across the country, according to a new poll. A Political Morning Consult poll released Wednesday found that 75% of surveyed Americans say that the defunding of police departments is a reason that violent crime is increasing in the United States. The survey reports that 49% said defunding police was a major reason for the rise in violent crime, while 26% said it was a minor reason, and only 25% said it was not a reason for the spike in violent crime. Now, whether that's true or not, and whether it's a direct result of the defund the police movement, it doesn't matter if that's what sticks with people and in their head. This was another reason why this didn't make sense and was a horrible strategy before going into midterms. So, hey, Kevin's Corner. Odingo Mabuto said, my contribution to you for your intelligence as a very beautiful and very polite young woman. Thank you so much for the super chat. So, as a result of this horrible messaging, this inability to compartmentalize and talk about things holistically, we have more gun ownership. We have defund the police that has become widely unpopular with voters. And then we have Biden, okay, that has increased the police budget as a result. So every single thing that they thought they were doing or wanted to do or wanted to gain from this, they did the exact opposite. And you know who it doesn't help? It doesn't help anyone in prison for non-violent offenses, because now all of those people are going to be wrapped up in this. Okay, thanks to people that wanted to push these ridiculous boundaries that didn't really make sense in the beginning. But anyway, let's take a look at this. Biden budget proposal calls for increase in law enforcement spending. The answer is not to defund the police, President Joe Biden said in a visit to New York City last month. In keeping with his calls to fund the police, President Joe Biden proposed budget announced Monday includes $17.4 billion for federal law enforcement to combat violent crime and $1.7 billion. That's $1.7 billion above the 2021 enacted level. During his State of the Union address this month, Biden drew support from Republicans and Democrats when he said we should all agree the answer is not to defund the police, the answer is to fund the police. Bipartisan efforts at police reform have failed, and Republicans have sought to tie Democrats to the defund the police movement and portray them as weak on handling crime in the run-up to the midterms election. Biden's proposal directly addresses those attacks. It calls for strategies such as community policing to address crime prevention and intervention. So $17.4 billion was given to federal law enforcement, and we cannot forget all of the millions, possibly billions, that were given to local agencies that were actually COVID funds. So that was like a two-way trick bag, okay? For the simple fact that they were out here telling you, oh my God, COVID is so deadly, shut down your businesses, mask your children, don't send them back to school. And the whole time, right, they're pretending that these funds are to go to this deadly, it's just so unimaginably deadly pandemic. However, they're taking money from that and giving it to the police, okay? We saw this happen all over, in particularly places like Chicago. And as a result of that, the target was missed. The target was missed. Federal cannabis arrests jumped 25% under Biden. After a dip during the peak of the pandemic in 2021, federal law enforcement agents and their partners arrested 25% more people for cannabis-related crimes in 2021 during the first year of the Biden administration. But while a post-pandemic bump in arrests would have been fair to expect, the biggest jump in cannabis arrests in a decade was not. Just in case you're missing the point here, okay? We've had the biggest jump in a decade for non-violent offenses. That is what happens. That is what has happened as a result of completely being so polarizing, pushing people out of the conversation, going so far ridiculously left, taking up for or attempting to be soft on people that are violent attackers, and trying to mix those in with people that have committed non-violent offenses. This was a huge mistake. This was a huge mistake. And common sense will tell you that criminalizing someone for homelessness, someone for drug-related charges, someone for selling loose cigarettes, someone for jumping the turnstile, someone for bouncing a check is not the same and is not in the same category as violent criminal attacks and assaults. And when you do not have the ability, to compartmentalize those and get outside of your binary, this is what happens. And so you completely wasted a lot of people's time. You completely reverse everything that actual solid criminal justice reform activists worked really hard for. Completely reverse all of the work that people working with the Trump administration, whether you want to admit it or not, whether you like it or not, this happened in real time and it happened on inked paper. Okay? All of the moves that they made to go towards criminal justice reform has been undone under the Biden administration. And a huge part of that is thanks to the people that make victims feel like they are an afterthought. This is a reason why people are going to get armed, because they don't trust you, they don't trust this government, they don't trust the response time of the police. They believe that if they are to be raped, assaulted, attacked, that you are going to take the side of the person that did the attacking. That you will go protest on their front steps to defend the attacker. This is what many older voters saw. This is what many people that face actual violence in their neighborhoods because they do not have the financial opportunity to live in gated communities and high rises like some of these they do not have the opportunity to live in gated communities and high rises like some of these privileged people that jump on Twitter to defend violent attackers. And not only that, as a result of that, you are hurting so many people that actually deserve a fair chance in this system. You are hurting so many people that are not justly receiving due process, who are sitting in prison with not the right to a speedy trial. Because of you, instead of continuing these conversations, both politicians and media have thrown them under the bus. No longer allowed to be talked about, completely silenced and censored. Specifically not going to be talked about going into midterms. You have Black Lives Matter that is absolutely not getting the same amount of airtime. This has hurt so many people. And the crazy part about it is anybody with an inkling of common sense could have seen this coming a mile away. But when I talked about this 2 years ago, and I talked about how unpopular defund the police was and how this was actually going to hurt and push the movement backwards, not forward, I was told I was wrong, I was tripping, that is not what was going to happen. And well, here we are. And, I'm not really a person to say, I told you so, but and so now you have followers of the Young Turks and Anna Kasparian, I think I'm saying her name right, who are basically eating their own, attacking their own, going to push people. And, I don't care about that particularly, because I think we need more nuanced people and people with common sense, because that's the only way we're actually going to get results, and not pushing people into these super far left, super far right, just so polarized, can't get anything done because you're not reaching actual regular everyday people. Your echo chambers on Twitter are not translating at the polls. The highly polarized binaries are not translating at the polls. So all of this money that was funneled into Black Lives Matter, and on some levels, with everything that came out of it, I mean, at least, a little success should have come from that, but it's been nothing but steps backwards. Bruce the Boss, thank you so much for the $10 super chat. He said they ran on defund the police to galvanize the Black vote, got the vote, and quickly did a 180. Is that not the definition of political chump? But they voted for Crime Bill Joe. Bruce the Boss, thank you so much for the super chat. You are dead on the money. What people need to realize is that you are not important. You were political convenience. And some of us knew this from the beginning, said this from the beginning. And the crazy part about it is, the most unfortunate part about it is not even like the silencing of the movement as much as it is the step backwards on actual paper, actual legislation in real time. So every single thing that a lot of these people pretended to be against is happening at a worse rate under the Biden administration. And not only is it not happening, but if you talk about it, you will be censored. Your media isn't even going to address it because they know it's not popular going into midterms. Luke Hazley said, progressives are like locusts. Their goal is full destruction while their small elitist group watches from their protected environments. I'm starting to believe that. Because when you can't even address these topics and do a completely, conceptualize the pros and the cons, right? It's this longing to just get these ideas and these agendas pushed through and this ideology without looking at the totality of how it's impacting the community, how it's impacting voters, what voters are actually asking for and wanting, and what can bring voters out to the polls. And so to see them attacking her when what she's saying in a lot of ways is true. And that type of thing is what has scared a lot of independents, has scared a lot of suburban Democrats and older Democrats that felt like, yeah, I'm not cool with this. I'm not feeling it. And a lot of people tried to align themselves with something that like TikTok legislation. Very microwaved, not really thoroughly discussed or well thought out. And if you don't agree with that, then tell me why absolutely nobody is talking about it at this point. Where it's being censored, where you don't see these discussions being had to the same extent. The same people y'all said were down for the people are not even going to have these discussions with you, don't give a crap about you because it will hurt Biden and Democrats at the poll come midterms. But you know, trying to explain this to people makes you the enemy and all these other names and things and whatever that they come up with. I think that an approach that makes sense for the taxpayer, the everyday individual, the community, I think that's possible. I think it's very possible. I think it's a way to address people having a speedy trial, people not having their rights taken advantage of, right? People not enduring actual police brutality. I think it's a way to do this while also being honest, okay, about violent criminals, attackers, and our highest priority being to keeping communities safe, particularly women and children. Okay, and if you do not think that there are concerns about that, you are sadly mistaken. It's showing in how people are responding to polls. It's showing in how people are going to respond to voting for midterms, and it's also showing in a recent gun ownership. You can feel how you want to feel. You can think whatever you want to think about it. Your opinion can be whatever you may want it to be, but that is not a reflection of how people's feet are moving in real time. The decisions people are making in real time, and people want to be safe. And when people don't start to feel safe, they're going to take that into their own hands. But to not want people to be armed and to also sugarcoat, okay, violent attacks, nothing about that is compassionate. Nothing about that is progressive. Let us not forget that many of these mental hospitals were closed because people didn't think that it was the right solution. The mental hospitals were being conducted properly. And then even that becomes another thing, because the authority to say, oh, well, I can just hold you at this mental hospital without your permission or authority, even that in some ways is a prison within itself. And so these discussions, and you'll have some people say, oh, well, we have to address these issues at the root. We have to talk about, the system that is creating this, which I think all of us can agree with. I don't think it's many people that don't think that we need to address poverty, failing schools, right? And all of these other issues that lead people into whatever mental issues. Big pharma, some of y'all don't even want to discuss that, but the role even big pharma plays in this. So there's a lot of things to discuss and discussions that can happen, but that doesn't negate, or I should say, that doesn't give us a pass to leave actual victims as a afterthought, right? To try to gloss over what's happening in real time, or not specifically hold people accountable. That still has to happen, okay? And I think that we live in a world where both can be addressed, but that still doesn't change the fact that people that are violent, assault, homicide, rape, right, and all of these other things, robbery, need to have consequences and swift consequences. And all I'm going to say to progressives is, if you don't want the police to do it, the people are. The people are. And that's why you get the person in the bodega, right, that as he's being attacked, he defends himself. And you see, even in places like Philadelphia, where justified homicides are increasing, you have people saying no more. We don't want to play this game anymore. We don't want to do this anymore. Not only do you have more people becoming gun owners, but you have more people standing up for themselves, and they're saying we're not going to take it. If the police won't handle it, there's going to be swift consequences. And the fact that people are trying to turn a blind eye to this is something to be said about that. So that's why when I talk about these topics, we can't just talk about like one part. We have to talk about how these things are intertwined and what is the result of them, what's happening, the different areas that connect. And yes, some of these things are connected, but it doesn't take like one thing that I've never stood for, and it should be obvious. If it's not obvious, this is literally why I'm a gun owner. This is why I carry a firearm on me every day, because I absolutely believe in the right to self-defense. Period. In the story. I do not believe in waiting on the police or the DA or whoever to give a crap about my life. I don't care about your 41 offenses. You run across me on 42 and it'll be your last. And I'm not the only person that feels like this. Millions of Americans all across the country feel like this, and it's showing up. It's showing as a result of people that have dropped this bad messaging like a hot tamale. It's showing up in gun ownership and the people willing to now defend and protect their lives. And so why people want to double down on these ideologies that don't make sense, don't make people feel safe. And sorry to tell you, I think that we should prioritize nonviolent people, peaceful people, over violent attackers. So, this is what you gained. If you want to ignore, because this is a big problem that people have, right? They like to go with the themes of things. They like to go with what's hashtagging and what's twittering. And the whole time, it's not translating at the polls. It's not translating on paper. It's not being inked into the legislation. If anything, the reverse is what we see happening right now. And so you can try to ignore it. You can try to pretend like it's happening. That's fine. Many of you have over the last couple of years. And I guess that's fine with some of you, but you'll keep getting what you've been getting until you are able to have these conversations holistically. And not only that, but look at what's actually happening in real life and the things that everyday people care about. This is the result you'll get. You'll get ignored. You'll get dropped. You'll get censored. You'll get forgotten. So anyway, good luck to Anna over there at the Young Turks. I'm interested to see how this is going to play out. and if this is going to affect, how people view her or her future takes or anything like that. But we'll see. Don't let people bully you into thinking that common sense or safety or any of this is just talking points or corporate talking points or any of the other things they try to come up with to alienate, okay, people that talk about actual concerns and actual issues. So we'll see. But I was like, this is interesting. This is interesting. But anyway, thank you to everyone who joined tonight. If you are not subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and hit that subscription button below. If you are not following me on Instagram, Rhonda_Mary, and RhondaMary Vids. Also, I am on Twitter at I am RhondaMary. It's some version of RhondaMary. You will find me. Thank you to everyone who super chatted. Thank you to everyone who supports this content, this channel, and we will be talking soon. Bye.